And we are live, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome back to Creation Conversations, where things are slightly different this week, but should all function exactly the same for you all watching if everything's gone according to plan. So it's great to have you all here. It's great to see some people already in the chat, and do get your questions in as well, because of course we are joined by Professor Andy McIntosh, who is here with us, and we're very much looking forward to have him share some stuff with us in a little bit, particularly to promote as well the Truth in Science Summer School, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, of which I'm actually going to be speaking at, which is coming up, as well as Andy and a number of others. But we'll introduce a little bit more about that as we go. We've got the whole team here, with the exception of Glenn, who's busy today. We've got Diane, we've got John, we've got Craig and Sam and myself, of course, Professor Andy McIntosh, which is wonderful. But Sam, we've hit a little bit of a milestone this week, so over to you to sort of let everybody know what we're doing about the milestone.
All right. Okay. So we have hit a massive milestone for us. So we have hit 4,000 subscribers. Thank you so much, everyone, for getting us across this line. Really does mean the world to all of us here at Creation Research, especially the lengths that we go to prepare these creation conversations for you. It really does mean the world. And so we've got a little bit of a surprise for everyone. So we are actually doing a giveaway today. We are giving away a t-shirt of We're Not Related and One Deadly Bite. I'll hide that graphic so Joe can show the t-shirt in person. Look at that gorgeous t-shirt.
Stop
Lovely.
Following me. We're not related. We call them witness tees because they've proven to be such good conversation starters. In fact, one supporting church in Manchester bought a whole load of these off of us because they said, we do street evangelism all the time. We want to wear them because they're so effective. So there's the t-shirt. What else have we got, Sam?
We also have a DVD brand new into Creation Research. This is the Wonders Without Nature film that Joe filmed in the States right before COVID hit, which is One Deadly Bite. Great program.
This is the one that we did with David Reeves. It's part of his Wonders Without Number video series. And it's one of the programs which I put together a couple of years back, but in fact, it was one of the first programs I did with you, John. So it should be pretty good. It's really good to see it in person. But of course, you've got the chance to receive one of these, or both of these, actually. But Sam, how is it going to work?
So all you have to do is just be in the live stream and make sure you send a message so we know you're here, and your name will automatically get entered into a random name picker, which we will pick right at the end of the show. And so we will also provide details as to how to get in contact with us so we can send you your goodies.
And we will mention that a couple more times throughout the stream so that everybody knows and hears. Just stick us a hello, stick us a hey, stick us an I want to win. And you could be receiving one of those two things as we go. And it's a bit of a thank you to you all as well for helping us achieve actually over 4,000 subscribers, because it's going up and up and up all the time. And we look forward to the next milestone of 5,000. But thank you very much for that, Sam. All right, I'm going to go over to John now, because John, I'd like you to introduce Andy tonight. And I know you've worked together in the past, and Andy's been over to Australia and all sorts. So John, over to you.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, team, and welcome, Andy. It's great to see you again, mate.
Good to see you, John.
Thank you. Even though we're 12,000 miles apart, whatever that is in kilometres, it's good to have you on this show, because you and I met a long time ago. If I remember correctly, Randall Hardy had taken me to a meeting at Leeds University, and there was someone called Andy McIntosh, looking a little bit more sprightly than either you or I do today. But I really enjoyed the time we had, got to meet you, got to know you, and we've had a good friendship ever since. In fact, we invited you to Australia as well, didn't we?
You certainly did, and I've had quite a number of meetings with you in various parts, as in up in near Brisbane, and then also down in Tasmania with Craig and you. So it's very good to see Craig on.
you even visited our Jurassic Ark Museum. Tell the audience what you thought of that.
Well, I thought it was a very brilliant idea. Not a lot of the exhibits were, well, there were some exhibits there, but I know you've got an awful lot more now. And you've just opened a new museum, I seem to record, just a few weeks ago. So it went very well, from what I gather.
Absolutely correct. Now, Andy, the thing that I enjoyed about meeting you is your information comes from quite an academic background, but your ability to bring all that tough stuff down and use pictures to illustrate the genius in God's creation, because the design elements, the mathematics, etc., that's your field, isn't it? That's where you come from academically.
It is my field. In fact, I do sometimes speak, and I spoke recently at the International Conference on Creation in the US just a week or so back. I spoke on thermodynamics and information in DNA. And it's a very interesting subject, and I'd love to talk to some of you guys about that sometime. But, that needs an awful lot of careful thought on energy pathways, all sorts of things to do with information. But I love talking also about just straight design talks, which is what I'm doing tonight, on the bombardier beetle. I'm actually doing some research on the bombardier beetle in Liberty University in Virginia. And I'm hoping to have some students work on it this autumn, or as they call it, the fall. And maybe we'll see what comes of it. But we're trying to develop the spray system of the bombardier beetle.
Mm-hmm. More of that coming up soon. But in essence, what you regard your talks, your ministry, your research as is a wonderful example of Romans chapter 1, where it says God's handiwork is seen in his whole creation. And tonight, today, wherever part of the world you're actually in, we're going to be blessed by hearing some of the unbelievable details and care that God has put into his handiwork, correct?
That's true. And all the glory is to him, not to me. I just enjoy, as you've just said, transmitting this information. I even use it sometimes in open air work. I've just been doing some open air work in Bournemouth. Hence, my face is a little bit sunburnt, believe it or not. We have the Riviera of England in Bournemouth, and it's very sunny down there, a bit sunnier than where I live. And we've had some great times. And I do use some creation-related matters in the open air, and I found it to be very effective. People do want to listen. They won't agree with you, but they will listen as you speak in the open air on these things. Joe may have done it himself as well.
Well, welcome to our program, Andy. We're going to hear a bit more from you soon, but Joe wants to piggyback a commercial for both what you're going to be speaking at and he's going to be speaking at. So, Joe, tell us what's coming up.
Yes, indeed. Well, I've got the little leaflet here. I don't know if you have one of these as well. We do, yes. Snap, there we go. Great stuff. Yes, the Truth in Science Summer School is coming up on the 31st of August through to the 1st of September, and I'll be speaking there along with a whole host of other people as well. You can see the full list here now. Truth in Science is something that you're heavily involved in, Andy, isn't it?
Yes, it is indeed. May I share my screen, because I've got
all means over to you. Yes, go for it.
Yeah, it's actually on my screen now. If you just let me share it, thank you. You can then, that's not quite meant to be like that. Oh dear, I don't know what happened there. I don't know why it's not working. It shouldn't be. That's it now. Okay, so you can see my screen.
I can, yes, I can see it all up there. Yeah,
that's right. And so that screen shows you the essence of what's involved at the Truth in Science Summer School. You could see the picture from last year of our summer school, which had about 120, about 100 students and about sort of 10 speakers and a few other helpers. And it's at Yarnfield Park, 31st of August and the 1st of September. Thursday and Friday. Yarnfield Park is in Staffordshire, in the middle of the country, not far from where Sam lives in Dudley, just about an hour away from there, maybe. And it's about an hour south from Manchester. So it's fairly central. £65 for the 2 days. And we just love other young people between the ages of about 16 up to about 24, that sort of age bracket. And if you're older, you're still welcome to come, but that's what it's geared for college students or sixth formers, as we call them in our country, preparing to go up to college, because there's such an onslaught today, once you get to college, of not just evolutionary ideas, Joe, but also woke ideas where, your revisionist ideas of history, trying to say that we've got it all wrong in terms of history, and any Christian ideas of history are removed. But also, as you well know, some of the biggest problems are coming from pushing the LGBTQ agenda, which is very strong in academia. So all these things present quite a problem for Christians going to college. So we've got a series of talks on all sorts of issues. Creation evolution is certainly in there, but we've got talks like the critical race theory. What is it, and is it biblical? The state of the nation and how we are to respond. That's from Christian Concern for Our Nation. Another one is principles of education and the Christian worldview. And then, of course, we got the creation evolution talks, creation theology, asking the right questions. And we've got talks on how old is the earth and how can we know, by Paul Garner. And we've also got a closing sermon from Conrad Pomeroy, who's the pastor of Dudley Baptist Church. And the keynote plenary at the beginning is from Peter J. Williams on the reliability of the New Testament. He's the warden of Tyndale House in Cambridge. He's absolutely brilliant. I've just been with him on the open air in Bournemouth. Wonderful gentleman. And I think any young person coming will just know that they've come to a first-class top speaker conference. I'm not speaking, so I can say that. I'm just helping to organise it. So I'm not talking about myself there. So £65 is a subsidised rate.
Let me just say as well, Andy, very quickly, because that's a key thing I think you've pulled out, is the fact that it's not just about, here's some stuff about doing science, or if you're a university student or whatever. And of course, it is going to be very, very valuable if you are a university student. But the fact that you've got stuff like, the critical race theory, the fact that you've got stuff like the state of the nation and how we are to respond, and a number of other things. This is really vital for any young person, whether they're going to university or not, because these are the kind of issues that you're going to come up with in life, or have to deal with in life, whether you go to university or not, because it's so prevalent today. So it's well worth attending, even if you're not, a university or college student. If you're of that sort of age range, these are the kind of things that you're going to be dealing with. I'm sure, as you know, I do the open air stuff as well, Andy, as you. So it's the kind of thing that we come up against just in the everyday evangelism side of things. So could
I just say one other thing,
really
Joe? Two things, Joe, if I may just say.
Of course.
Obviously, you yourself are speaking on making sense of fossils from a biblical perspective, and you are bringing, I believe, some fossils, including me. So you'll be talking about your fossils. But the other thing to say is to book, guys, if you'd like to come, and you can really, if you could just come for one day, you'll be blessed. But try and come for 2 days, and you book at www.truthinscience, as it says there, top left, truthinscience.uk. All you have to remember is truthinscience.uk. And it will go straight into the booking button, which is a big red button, as soon as you go in. And you just pay your £65 and you're logged in. We've got about 60 places still left. We're creeping up. I'd love it to go a bit faster, but we've still got 2 or 3 weeks to go, and students tend to book very late on. So please consider, booking, and get your mum and dad to perhaps help you if you're worried about the £65. Or if you're really struggling, just send an email through Joe Hubbard to me, and he will forward it if there's really an issue there. But we'd love to have you.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to go over to your main presentation now, Andy, if you want to get that up and ready, if you need to do anything with that. While Andy's sorting himself out, just a reminder that we're doing our 4,000 subscriber giveaway today. You could be receiving this Stop Following Me t-shirt. We're not related, as well as this DVD, brand new for the Creation Research, One Deadly Bite, filmed with David Reeves, who I know that Andy has done stuff with David in the past as well. All you need to do is just say hi in the chat, say hello, let us know that you're there, and Sam is keeping a record, and we will do the old draw from a hat a little later in the program and let people know who has won the giveaway. But Andy, you're here. I think the presentation's all ready, so I'm just going to go over to you to do your presentation regarding the bombardier beetle.
Yeah, and how many hours have I got?
Oh, no, 3 or 4. You've got plenty of time now.
Yeah, well, you guys in Australia are just waking up, so you're fine. Us guys over here are going to sleep, so yes. I'm not going to go like that long. I might stick to just 2 hours. We'll see.
Oh, I see.
Anyway, here we go. So it's great to be with you all. And let me just say briefly, I've worked in all sorts of areas. I've worked in the Royal Aircraft Establishment on aviation and aerodynamics. I love to teach on that. I did old-fashioned wind tunnel testing in my day. That's all been changed now with computer fluid dynamics. And I also, as I've just been indicating, I've actually been working on the bombardier beetle in the latter part of my research at Leeds University. So we're going to talk about this beetle. And I'm attached to the University of Leeds. And what I'm talking about is actually biomimetics. What's biomimetics, you say? Well, it's all to do with learning from nature. So you actually may have heard of things like the lotus leaf, the gecko foot, the burdock plant, which gave the idea of Velcro, the Wright flyer, when the first people, the Wilbur and Orville Wright, flew in 1903. They were basically copying the birds. That's an example of biomimetics. And there are all sorts of other examples which I'll be referring to from my bombardier beetle work. So learning design from the created world is what I'm really talking about here. And that's what biomimetics means. Just to give you a little bit of an idea as to the sort of atmosphere I sometimes get. Way back, Professor Richard Dawkins said this. I need to go backwards. He wrote, this is 2006, that's a long time ago, but Stuart Burgess and myself have both worked in academia, and we've spoken quite openly about our Christian faith. And this is what Richard Dawkins said once. Maybe Burgess and McIntosh are right, and all the rest of us, biologists, geologists, archaeologists, historians, chemists, physicists, cosmologists, and yes, thermodynamicists, that's me, and respectable theologians, that's not me. The vast majority of Nobel Prize winners, fellows of the Royal Society and of the National Academies of the world are wrong. Not just slightly wrong, but catastrophically, appallingly, devastatingly wrong. And then he said, it is possible. If Burgess and McIntosh are right, though, he says, the scientific establishment has fallen. And I thought that was a wonderful quote from The Guardian, I think it was, no less. I don't generally take The Guardian for obvious reasons, because they never gave me a right of reply to that letter. And, I wrote to the editor and I got no reply either. So I don't generally subscribe to that paper for those reasons. But that's what we're up against in the world. But frankly, I don't mind. I don't expect Dawkins to ever agree with me because, of course, he's got no friendship with Christ. He stands against any belief in any God. And of course, he doesn't know the truth. But when people know the Lord Jesus Christ, I do expect them to agree with me. And it saddens me greatly when people who are believers stand against the creation position. With that in mind, there is a book called Wonders of Creation, which Stuart Burgess and myself have written. You can get this on Amazon. In fact, you can get it quite pretty good price on Amazon. Day One, you'd probably have to, which is the publisher, that'd be a little bit over, probably about 22, 23 pounds, might even be the full 25, but you can get it from Amazon at about 20, I believe. So there is actually a chapter on the bombardier beetle. Let me just say that if you're doing anything to do with design, is this a God of the gaps idea? My speaking on design, does that mean that I don't understand some things that I just say, well, God did it? Actually, no, it's the opposite. It's because of what we do understand and what we do know, this points to design. So Romans 1:20 is a very valid verse. The invisible things of God from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead. Another verse for you, Colossians 1 says, for by him were all things created, things that are in heaven, that are in earth, visible, invisible, thrones, dominions, principalities, powers, all things were created by him and for him, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist. Hebrews 11 verse 3 says, the things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. The reason I put this right up front is that I want you to see that I expect things to be designed because of Romans 1 verse 20. And our job as Christians who believe in creation and who are scientists is to actually unfold what God has already made and to show that it has indeed wonderful design features. So do you see that this is not us grappling in the dark and saying, oh, we don't understand how this works. It must be that God did it. It's totally the opposite. If you like, I was ahead of the game, not that I was particularly doing it for my glory, please don't think so. But I was looking at this beetle and thinking, this is amazing. This beetle does extraordinary things. It must be designed. And I must be able to find out what's going on. So I was asking the right questions. Do you see? So when you have this creation position, when it comes to the bombardier beetle or whatever it is you're thinking of, I'm asking the question, how does it work? Here's a picture of the beetle spraying a tiny little spray at a finger. So it shows you that it can be very small. Some are a little bit bigger than that, not much bigger. Where is it found? Well, mainly in hot countries, but they are found here in England as well. We're going to look about the valve system. We're going to look at the chemical system. I'm not sure we'll get through all of this. Don't worry, you can go to sleep and have an ice cream and just forget me if you wish. But you'll see that actually I'm going to go fairly fast through some of this. I just want to keep your interest that there are quite a few things that actually we've gone through. We've got experimental prototypes, we've got a fuel injection system application, pharmaceutical one, a fragrancer application. Some of these we haven't followed on. We've actually moved on from fire extinguishers now to fire sprinklers. Not all of these have worked, but some of them have. Here's the African bombardier beetle. And where is it found? Well, it's found mainly in Asia, North America, South America, and of course, Africa, as I've shown you there. The African beetle is a bit bigger than the others, about 2 centimeters. The others are about 1.5 centimeters, maybe even down to 1 for European. I have seen some in the south of England. Apparently, they do exist because it's a bit warmer down there, and they're always close to water. And they feed on bits of meat. Some reckon that they may even be cannibals, although I think they do feed on dead creatures. I don't think they're generally feeding off live creatures which they've attacked. It's usually bits of meat that they find. I've even had some of them in my kitchen under in a plastic box with a glass top and had them scurrying around. Most interesting creatures. How does it work then, the bombardier beetle? Well, it ejects a mixture. I'll put all this slide up. It ejects a mixture of chemically heated steam and noxious chemicals out of its back end. It is not passing air after a big meal, though, I hasten to add. So it's not doing what, I won't use the word that some people would use, but it's not doing that, okay? So it's not, you're not hearing the, when somebody's just eaten too much. It's actually, amazingly, a separate system to the digestive system. And using this system of blasting, I'll show you a video of it soon, it wards off predators such as ants, birds, spiders, and frogs. It's generally wins, and it usually stuns its opponent. It doesn't usually kill the opponent. But it's got a movable exhaust turret, which can even move and come over its backside and go forwards, like I showed in the picture earlier of it shooting at a finger. So it's a bit like having a tank turret, where the tank turret can even move right over its head and go and, come from the back and move over forwards or in any direction it wishes. So it's much more versatile than the T whatever tanks we've sent recently. No, the Germans sent them recently to Ukraine. Well, they're much better than those because the turret can go in any direction it wishes. Now let me show you some video clips of this beetle. So let's hope that the sound works. Joe and Sam, let's see whether this works. I'm not hearing anything. Oh dear, don't say it's not working. Oh dear. Oops. Let me try again. Can you hear that?
Yep. Yes.
Yep, that's what you actually hear in the laboratory. That was in the laboratory of Tom Eisner in Cornell University in New York State some years ago. Okay. Now, I'm going to play you another video. This time it's from our friends in the BBC and this is from the film Alien Empire, quite some years ago.
Few creatures will risk annoying a bombardier beetle. It mixes a cocktail of deadly chemicals in a special chamber. They react and explode at boiling point from its rear end.
That's quite fun,
awesome,
isn't it, watching
weapon.
that? Now we're going to play from the same film. We're going to play a little, a bit of a different clip this time. This one is from a different film called Secret Weapons, and it shows you Professor Tom Eisner. Sadly, he's died now, but he was a most interesting gentleman, sort of old school biologist, loved to do experimental work. And he's written a book called For the Love of Insects, and it's a delightful book. Just watch these two clips.
One of the really amazing things about this animal is its ability to spray in a very beautifully aimed fashion. And that shows up very nicely when you put the animal on indicator paper. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pinch very lightly one leg after the other, just as if I were an ant biting these legs. I'm going to start with the right hind leg, right front leg, left front leg,
At 400 frames per second, the action has been slowed down, but not enough to see the individual pulses. So they went to a lab and filmed the beetle at an even faster speed, at an incredible 4,000 frames a second.
oh, that.
were the pulses, each one corresponding to the individual bursts of sound.
So what these clips are showing, guys, is that Professor Eisner suspected, because you could hear a note from the beetle and a pure note, he knew that that must be representing each note, like a note on the piano represents a frequency. So E would be somewhere around 440 cycles per second. That's A on the piano. Or if it was a bit lower, it might represent only 250 cycles per second for C on the piano. So all the notes on the piano have pure frequencies. So he knew that if he was hearing such a pure note, there must be a vibration of something around that frequency that you could actually hear. And indeed, he found that, because when you slowed down the film, you could see the individual pulses, as it was called, on the film. So we then began to look at the scanning electron micrographs from a sacrificed beetle in Tom Eisner's laboratory. Let me tell you a fun fact, that actually Tom Eisner began to know each of these beetles as individuals. You know, he'd say, oh, that's Fred, that's Jane, that's Peter. And so, of course, when he cut one up, he had to sacrifice one. But, you know, he was quite a character, was Tom Eisner. And he could tell that there was an inlet valve, okay, which is the one that I'm pointing to there in the picture. You can't see it very clearly, but there is actually an inlet system there. You're looking at the exterior of a combustion chamber, and the combustion is going on inside, and there's a blast coming out from the exhaust system, which is the more pinky arrow there that you can see. And I said, is that the inside of the tube that you cut? He said, no, that's the outside of the tube. And I suddenly realized there was a membrane, which that's pointing to, which lifts under pressure. That was a light bulb moment for me. So what you've actually got, looking end on, is when the membrane's collapsed and the valve is closed, this is just the outlet valve, then you've got the red part, the membrane, just sitting down there. But when the membrane is open under pressure, then it obviously allows the blast to come out, and that's what's going on. So there is quite a number of parts to the cycle here, and we'll just go through three of them. You probably can't read that slide too well, but it's actually saying that there are two chemicals coming in, hydroquinone and hydrogen peroxide. And then you've got a catalytic reaction on the side of the combustion chamber, which involves, as we say in body chemistry, when you're dealing with biological systems, you don't call them catalysts, you call them enzymes. And these enzymes are very important. They're either catalase or peroxidase or both, which are involved with the bombardier beetle. These cause the chemical reactions between hydroquinone and hydrogen peroxide to go much more quickly, even though those catalysts, those enzymes, don't take part in the reaction. So the catalysts, we believe, are on the walls of the combustion chamber. That then causes an explosion to take place, which stops more stuff coming in and opens, as I said to you, the exhaust valve, which I mentioned earlier. So you've got fuel inlet valves and exhaust outlet valves. And let me say this, that the size of the combustion chamber is only about 1 millimeter. You're dealing with a tiny, tiny combustion chamber. And the finding of a sophisticated pressure relief valve was a very important moment in this project. It really showed to us that we were on the right track, that we'd actually managed to see that there was these these chemicals were under pressure. They wanted to come out, mainly water and steam. And I suddenly realized it's a bit like a pressure cooker that is enabling these chemicals, mainly water and vapor, to come out under pressure. So one of the things that it's like is the V1. This was during the war, and it was powered by gasoline, petrol, and air exploding. And when it ran out of fuel, then the bomb, which was in the nose of this horrible aircraft, that bomb went off, of course, when it hit the ground. Many people died in the 1940s as Hitler sent these horrible beasts over the channel to England. Many people in the vicinity of London died. But the system was powered by an explosion, repeated explosion, pushing a jet out of the back, which pushed the flying bomb forward. Now, the Beetle obviously is not using this for propulsion, although it does brace itself as it makes the blast out of its backside. But it does show you that this idea of pulse combustion is something which has been known for decades and used even by the Germans during the Second World War. They didn't know anything about bombardier beetles. That came a little bit later. In fact, it was a Nazi during the Second World War called Schildknecht who understood the chemistry of the bombardier beetle. He was certainly a Nazi sympathizer. And Tom Eisner, a real sort of twist here. Tom Eisner was no friend, of course, to Nazi sympathizers, because you could probably guess from his name that Tom Eisner was actually a Jew. He's died now, but his father had to flee the Nazis. So there's an interesting side story to all this bombardier beetle. So anyway, back to the main point. You've got combustion par excellence, an explosion, but not just one explosion, repeated explosions. It's like having a machine gun coming out of your backside and being able to move it in any direction you wish, and to be able to shoot this machine gun at about 400 to 500 times per second. That is pretty impressive. I think you will agree. Now, just a word on the chemistry of what's going on. By the way, there'll be a test, and I'll ask Diane Eaker and John Mackay to mark it, and even Craig Hawkins. Now, just pulling your leg. I'll tell you this, that there was a certain gentleman that I'm going to refer to in a moment who does need to do some tests in chemistry. I'm coming to that. Anyway, here's the chemistry of the bombardier beetle written out. Now, I'm not expecting you to follow all this in detail, but some of you might. The chemistry is a hydroquinone, which is the C6H602, and the hydrogen peroxide is H2O2. It's got an extra oxygen to water. So the hydrogen peroxide wants to give off oxygen. It will do it fairly easily, but the hydroquinone doesn't easily give off its hydrogen. But once it does, that then becomes benzoquinone, and the released hydrogen combines with the released oxygen, and it produces water. So you've got two chemicals, hydroquinone, hydrogen peroxide, and the enzymes, the catalysts that I mentioned, are catalase and peroxidase. So this is catalytic combustion carefully timed. Now, you've all been taught that you don't play with fire. You don't play with fireworks when you're young. And if you're going to evolve this bombardier beetle chemistry, you'll imagine a lot of failed experiments with bombardier beetles blown up because they didn't quite get it right. But these bombardier beetles do get it right, and they've got a special system to contain this explosion in the explosion chamber and just to open the valve, the exhaust valve that I mentioned, to get the blast coming out. I told you that there was a certain man from Oxford, you can guess his name, who I reckon needs to do Catalysis 101 because he didn't understand one of the key issues of the bombardier beetle, which is, as I've mentioned, that the hydroquinone is very important and needs to release its hydrogen. And getting into a bit of detail here, some of you, maybe a third of you, will understand this if I use the term endothermic. What does that mean? Well, that means you've got to put heat in to get the reaction to work. Exothermic means that heat is given out. The hydrogen peroxide is an exothermic reaction. It gives off heat. So if you have a nice bottle of hydrogen peroxide and you happen to spill it on your smartphone, it will burn up your phone very quickly, particularly if it's pure hydrogen peroxide. It's a very dangerous chemical. Anyway, here's Professor Richard Dawkins in a younger incarnation of him, lecturing to young people in Faraday's lecture hall, no less, at the Royal Institution at Christmas, claiming that he understands the chemistry when he doesn't. Let's hear him. 1991.
In fact, the hydroquinone does nothing at all. We can put that on one side. The true story is that hydrogen peroxide on its own does decompose to form oxygen and water, but it needs a catalyst under normal conditions to do that. This black powder here is a catalyst. It's not the catalyst that the bombardier beetle uses. The bombardier beetle does use a catalyst, and it does, in fact, squirt this hot substance into the face of its enemy. But if you put a catalyst into a weak solution of hydrogen peroxide, then you're going to get a little bit of bubbling, and it's a little bit warm. That might have some effect on a predator. That might slightly deter a predator, and it would be not particularly dangerous to the beetle. Now we've got a smooth gradient, a bit more concentration of hydrogen peroxide, and that's distinctly warm. That would work more effectively against a predator. And by moving gradually up the slope, gradually increasing the concentration of hydrogen peroxide, we can end up with... So there is a smooth slope all the way up to the effective deterrent against...
Well, was he right?
predator.
No, he was wrong, because he made his fatal mistake by saying the hydroquinone has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with it. And he needs to go back and do Catalysis 101 or Chemistry 101. There is an important reaction of the hydroquinone. This is my friend Garth Hewitt some years ago at Liberty University, where I'm an adjunct professor, and he's a chemist, and he's showing how vital the hydroquinone is and what happens when you put that with a catalyst. And a little bit of heat is effectively has to go in, but you get a lot of heat out eventually. I'll explain that in a moment. Watch this.
Drop it straight down the center.
Yep.
That was a platinum catalyst.
Platinum catalyst.
Now as your quinone's formed. See, that's orange?
Yes, that's the orange. Thank you for showing me this, Garth. This is excellent.
Yeah, that orange there would be your benzoquinone. The bottom orangey color.
Now that's what Richard Dawkins should have done, was done some experiments where you've got both the hydrogen peroxide and the hydroquinone, and this is what is in fact going on. I don't apologize for this, because this is an important point. Actually, there's many more reactions than what I'm putting up here, but I'm breaking up the overall reaction into three. There is a endothermic reaction, which is the hydroquinone, which is the top one, okay? Then there is the hydrogen peroxide, which is the second one, which is exothermic. And Richard Dawkins was right on that. It gives off heat. But the reaction which he effectively missed was the third reaction, which is a product of the fact that you've released hydrogen, where you've had to put heat in to get it going, right? But you've definitely released hydrogen, and the hydrogen then combines with the oxygen, and bang, it makes a huge big blast, roughly or nearly 300 joules per mole, as against the 100 joules per mole of hydrogen peroxide on its own. And that means that overall you get about 200 odd joules per mole from the overall chemistry. Now, that's okay, that's a detail you might say, but it just shows to you that you shouldn't just believe everything that somebody says when they tell you, oh, you can get this system gradually. No, you can't. You need to know what you're doing. If you play with fire, you'll burn yourself. You'd have had a lot of problems with beetles blowing themselves to bits, or else getting eaten by predators. So how does it work? It's not simply hydrogen peroxide, it's hydrogen peroxide and hydroquinone. And there is something we don't yet fully understand. We don't yet understand how these chemicals are produced. We know they're produced in the same tube. And it's a very, very thin tube. And these reactants don't do anything to each other without a catalyst. It's only when those two reactants come into the combustion chamber that things happen very, very fast. So those are combustion chambers. There are two combustion chambers, and they are shaped a bit like a boxing glove. And you'll see there that at the top, there is a pinching of the boxing glove under pressure, which stops more hydrogen peroxide and hydroquinone coming in. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you can't see it on this picture, but there is an exhaust system where a membrane is lifted under pressure. Christine Ortiz from Massachusetts Institute of Technology has shown that in a blast, both carburetors, I might call them, or both combustion chambers are going on at the same time, causing their reactants to be pushed out as hot products, mainly steam and hot water. So here you can see it. Let me just show you this again. You can see that both combustion chambers are ejecting their mixture at the same time. So what did we copy? Well, actually, we didn't copy the chemistry. Having spent some time telling you about the chemistry, we didn't copy that. We just copied the valve system. And this was the early computer modeling that we did, where we took 1/8 of the volume of the chamber, assuming that it was a cylinder, when of course it isn't. But it just gives you some idea as to what's going on. When you take the volume to be the same, and the actual dimensions were very, very small indeed. The actual dimensions of the chamber were about 0.6 of a millimeter, so not quite a full millimeter width or diameter. And then if I show you this, you can see the other dimensions. We had a tube through which the mainly steam and hot water is going to emerge. So we're doing a computer simulation. We're not dealing with the chemistry. We're saying that we've got water which wants to boil but can't until a membrane right next to the small tube at the bottom here, this tube. So you're just seeing part of this tube, but it goes round there, and it's 0.05 of a millimeter radius. So it's 0.1 of a millimeter. That's very, very small diameter. And this is about 0.3 of a millimeter. So the total diameter of the actual chamber is about 0.6 of a millimeter. So this is small. You're not dealing with large things at all. We're going to say that we've got the hot water, it wants to boil. It's under pressure. We're going to assume that it's 0.1 of a bar. That means 0.1 of an atmospheric pressure above atmospheric, which is quite a high pressure for a small object like this. And the vapor pressure for boiling would then be a little bit higher than 100 degrees Kelvin above zero. So it's above 0 centigrade, which is 273 degrees Kelvin. So it's about 105 degrees centigrade, wants to boil. So it's in heated condition. It can't boil until you release this valve. So we're going to release that membrane at time t equals 0. We're going to make some assumptions about laminar flow. For those of you who know about such things, I won't go into detail for those who don't. Just assume that you've got something very, very small, that we can make some critical assumptions about the flow, which means we can simplify the computer modeling. That's basically what that means. We're going to see an ejection going to the right, and you're going to see a clock in the top right-hand corner, which is measuring how many milliseconds we're going to be using. In fact, we're only going to get to something like 2 to 3 milliseconds and everything will have taken place. What is a millisecond? It's a thousandth of a second, right? So if we get to 3 milliseconds, we've got all the water and the steam, no chemistry here, just got hot water and steam. If we get all that out in 3 milliseconds, if you do your sums, you'll realize that that is about 300 blasts per second. If we get it out in 2 milliseconds, that's about 500 times per second. We wanted to see whether heating the water and having it under pressure would get everything out as quickly as possible, and we found that it did. Watch the clock at the top right, 0.4 of a millisecond, 0.6 of a millisecond, almost at 1 millisecond. It looks like it's going from right to left, but actually it's the way the color's done. It's actually moving from left to right. Oh, we're nearly at 2 milliseconds now. We got most of the water and steam out. And by the time we get to about 3 milliseconds, certainly you've got very little left. So that was a very important finding, which we did in the computer modeling. So a very rich businessman then met us, heard me speaking on the computational fluid dynamics and said, will you build a rig? Well, I'd never built a rig in my life. So I had to get people who knew what they were doing. And we built a rig. I say we, I didn't do it, as I say, but I just watched other brilliant technicians build this rig. And it was made of perspex because we weren't quite sure what was going to happen with an electrical heater in the middle. Were we going to sort of blow this perspex combustion chamber? Well, it's not a combustion chamber, it's just a heating chamber. Were we going to blow it to bits? Well, we got a heating coil in there and we monitored the pressure. We got an inlet valve coming up from the bottom. There's an exhaust valve going to the left of the chamber there, and we've got a return valve here in case something goes wrong. The chamber is about 20 times the 1 millimeter chamber of the Beetle, so it's about 2 centimeters long. And this is the initial results we got from our experiment. You can see here that there is a laser going across the blast of water droplets. And that is a Malvern laser, which is measuring the droplet sizes. So that's what we were doing there. And you could see that we got a very sophisticated receptacle here to collect the water and the steam. I am being sarcastic. That is anything but ingenious. It's just simply a bin, a black bin, such as you put outside and give to the bin men on Fridays. We injected water and steam into that bin. Well, things got a bit more sophisticated as we moved on with the work. We were actually getting some very high frequencies. We got up to about 100, 200 cycles per second. And you can see here a much better prototype working in the top right-hand corner. And yet another one there. And this was used for fuel injection. This was exceedingly useful because this showed that we could add fuel droplets which have been made into droplets not by an atomizer, but by heating the fuel and then releasing it under pressure, breaks it into small droplets, which industry were very interested in. So that was one application which we were particularly pleased about, because that patent that we took out for a fuel injector, although it wasn't used for a fuel injector as such, it was used for an additive to add to diesel engines to try and reduce the nasties by adding what's called AdBlue into diesel engines. By having this system, you could eject very small droplets of AdBlue into the existing combustion chamber of a diesel engine, and that would then absorb a lot of the nasties, the sulfur dioxides, the nitric oxides and stuff, which are not good pollutants to put out of the back end of a diesel engine, like a truck, and so on. That's been used in Europe, in Sweden. So what have we learned? Precise catalytic chemistry going on with the Bombardier Beetle, precisely timed inlet valve and exhaust valve, controlled vapor explosion. I haven't talked to you about the sensory mechanism for this little tube to be sprayed in any direction it wishes. The movable turret I have talked about. The production of hydrogen peroxide and hydroquinone is a problem that's not yet been resolved. I'm hoping that eventually someone who knows about these things will be able to resolve it. We haven't yet resolved that. It does explosions at about 400 to 500 times per second. You can keep a blast going for about 2 or 3 seconds. Then it's doing, doing that repeatedly for 2 or 3 seconds, gets a bit exhausted, but then it will stop and then it will do it again for about 10 times. So that's why it usually wins against a predator like a wolf spider, which often loses a leg in the process of an encounter with a Bombardier Beetle. And it's an example of oscillating combustion, pulsing combustion, we call that. Classic example of biomimetics. The core technology copied is the combustion chamber design and the nozzle. There are applications to fuel injectors, as I mentioned, also pharmaceuticals. They would like to use it for nebulizers, for aqueous and organic examples of pharmaceutical nebulizers, aerosols and air fresheners, fire suppression, and also fire sprinkler systems. So there is quite a lot of possible applications. For a fuel injection system, you need to have very fine droplets. So you use a wide angle from the nozzle. That's one of the things that we can change. We have an active system where we are heating, whereas the Bombardier Beetle does not control its exhaust valve. It's a passive system. Once it gets to a particularly high pressure, then it opens the exhaust valve. Whereas in our system, we actively control when that pressure relief valve of the exhaust valve is released. We also control how long the inlet valve stays open. So there's quite a lot of features here which have come out from more recent work. Let me just show you one last clip, and this is David Attenborough on the range of bombardier beetles. And he's showing that you can get a throw distance of at least 20 centimeters from a 1 millimeter combustion chamber. Let's have a look at this video.
But the master of chemical warfare is the bombardier beetle. It can create a chemical reaction within its body so violent that boiling caustic liquid explodes out of its abdomen. By pulsing the jet 500 times a second, it keeps its rear end just cool enough to prevent it being cooked.
That last bit isn't quite true, because it's not the frequency which stops its rear end being, because it's got very important material properties, very low thermal conductivity materials by where the spray comes out. But it is true that you can change the droplet size, and by changing the aperture of the little tube coming out in our system, you can get very different results, whether you've got a large throw with large droplets or a small throw with very small droplets. Sometimes you could get even a fairly large throw, even with small droplets. So the throw ratio is about 200. You can actually get 2 meters throw from a chamber which is just 20 centimeters. So, sorry, you could get 4 meters from across the room from a chamber which is about 20 centimeters. So if you work that out, I said 20 centimeters. A throw of 4 meters from a chamber of 2 centimeters long, get it right. Well, that of course represents 400 centimeters from a chamber of 2 centimeters, so it's a throw ratio of about 200. So that's an important finding. So what's the summary here? Well, we've understood the physics of the chamber and the valve system in the bombardier beetle. It's an example of repetitive pulse combustion. We've got the modality, we've got the droplet sizes, the pressure relief exit valve, the inlet valve, the timing of it. This work was all sponsored by Swedish Biomimetics 3000. The applications weren't so obvious for the needleless injector, although there could be applications for that, but they were fairly evidently of interest for the pharmaceutical industry. And also there are other things that I should just point out here. For each of these applications, there are typical droplet sizes. For the pharmaceutical application, where you're in a nebulizer where you want your lungs to be helped to breathe again, you're dealing with sizes of about 1 to 10 microns. Well, 10 microns is quite small, but it's not the smallest. Fire extinguishers, maybe 100 microns, that's bigger. 10 to 50 microns for a fuel injector, and 10 to 20 microns for an aerosol. So 1 to 10 microns actually is the smallest one that we did get. Well, we got a prize in 2010 for the award for outstanding contribution to innovation and technology. This was in the Times Higher Educational Supplement. Let me just briefly talk about the application to fire extinguishers and fire sprinkler systems. We had some difficulties due to size and power needed for the fire extinguisher. I had some students work on a scaled up model where you've got a lot of water in not just a 2 centimeter chamber, but maybe in something 10 times that size, 20 centimeters. And I was hoping that this would work, but of course the power needed is proportional to, or the power needed is proportional to the volume that you're trying to heat. Yet the heaters that we were using, the amount of heat that they gave out was proportional to the square, the surface area. So you're on a hiding to nothing. As you get bigger, you haven't got the power to heat. So we had to admit that we didn't quite get that right. And although we had a good go, the students had a good go, I could see it wasn't going to work. So we've now come to the idea of a fire sprinkler system. This could be an applied system in naval vessels where you've got limited space. You can't afford a fire on a submarine at sea, or even on a ship, a destroyer. You don't want to have a fire in that vessel. Certainly space vehicles, you don't want a fire. So what we imagine is a sensor. It's very easy to have an infrared sensor to guide this sprinkler system to point in the right direction. And supposing you felt some heat in the corner of the room, you know that there is a danger of fire. So you then have my system, which squirts a mixture of steam and water. And by the time the steam gets there and all the little fine droplets, you've really just basically got cold water being fired in a very precise way to where there is the danger of a fire emerging. You don't need a huge amount of water for these small fire sprinklers. So I think actually, of course, it's all in your favor as you get smaller, because as you get smaller, you go down in the amount of power that you need to the cube of something of 1 over a distance effectively. So you're actually, it's becoming in your favor, and you've got more than enough power needed because that's going like the square. So the amount of power you needed is getting smaller at a much faster rate than the amount of power that you can actually generate. So this should work. We haven't yet got a working system, but I'm looking at doing that. So we are through with this talk, and there is more on the website bombardierbeetle.org, and there's a list of the patents that we've been developing, and they've been, of course, to guard other people from copying our ideas. So we've had great backing from this Swedish firm, and there's more, as I say, on the bombardierbeetle.org website. Questions from you?
Well, thank you very much for that, Andy. You might want to stop sharing your screen so that everybody can see you as well as everybody else. But other than that, there we go. Lovely. Thank you very much for that. That was absolutely fantastic, and I always enjoy listening to the Bombardier Beetle. I particularly like the personal attacks. I hope you don't mind me saying the personal attacks that you get from the like of Dawkins and so on and so forth. It shows you that you're doing the right thing somewhere. But yeah. Why don't we go over to the team first of all for some questions, and then I know we've got a whole list of questions that have come through on the live chat as well. But does anybody in the team have anything they'd like to ask Andy for discussion?
Craig, you can go first on this one.
Okay, well, I have a general one on design, Andy, because I know you're interested in bird feathers and
yes, I am.
Flight as well. A few weeks ago, I sent you a picture of a wing of a masked owl showing the wing edge feathers, and I'll quickly share my screen because I've got a picture.
Please do.
Of this.
Let's have a look at it.
Has that come up?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's showing the edge feathers of the masked owl, and given that in a good created world, owls would not need these for hunting, can you think of any other design advantages that these might have, or should they be considered an adaptation for hunting?
Well, I don't think it's the latter. I'll tell you for why. I think cheetahs are very, very fast creatures. We'd all agree. Cheetahs and jaguars, they're types of cats, okay? I very much doubt that that speed phenomena came, at the fore. I mean, it's possible God could have added that to them, but clearly it became a huge advantage when those cats were actually going to start using their prowess and their energy, brilliant spring hind leg system in order to get to tremendous speed and to attack predators. Now, I think the same thing applies when you're dealing with owls, which have very quiet flights. I think it may just have been that the Lord made some birds to have very, very quiet wings. It's actually a slight penalty, because if you have those types of feathers, you are actually separating what we call the vortex, which you get on the leading edge of the wing. You're making it into tiny little slices, which is why it's so quiet. I think the Lord just made variety of creatures, variety of birds, and owls well known to have these very quiet feathers. I can't think of a specific advantage, because they wouldn't have been feeding on voles and rats and other creatures, moles and other things before the fall. Maybe somebody can think of an advantage over some vegetation, but vegetation doesn't usually try to escape from being eaten, doesn't move, in other words. So, but I would say the system was there already, such that when the ecology of the world changed at the fall, owls would immediately be able to take advantage of their ability to fly quietly. And also they got brilliant hearing. They actually can hear a vole just using their ears, which are slightly displaced from being symmetrical either side. They get a 360-degree sound system, and they can hear the vole, hear the mouse, hear whatever it is that's in the undergrowth, and they come down with their talons and they get it. So both the combination of the very quiet wings and the brilliant hearing means that the owl can do what it does. So I think it's more likely to be that. I can't think of a specific advantage of that system before the fall.
Andy, if I can just add something there, because the same situation applies to human beings, and it was epitomized by Eric Liddell, who my father went to school with in Scotland. And
I didn't know that.
as Eric said, when he became famous for refusing to run on a Sunday at the Olympic Games, God made me to run. Right. Absolutely. Now, I can't think of a single benefit to human being survival pre-fall by running. We just enjoy it, because I used to train in running, and at the same time, because I wasn't a Christian, I would steal oranges from the orchard next door.
Did you know?
That would be the benefit. But I didn't have to run to catch any orange at all, whether it was falling off the tree or not.
Exactly.
So, God made me to run. It's just something we enjoy. And when I look at a cheetah running or any of those, I just delight. When I look at a horse racing, I just delight in the beauty of what's happening there. So I totally agree.
Yeah, I think, I thought you might agree. But it's a good question, Craig, and thank you for raising it. And thank you for giving me a little bit of time to think about that one as you got it.
I wonder if it's because owls fly at night.
They do.
And God designed them so that they wouldn't wake up everybody who was sleeping.
Absolutely. Us snorers wanted to have our beauty sleep, Diane. I'm sure you're right.
It's true. Imagine a load of pigeons taking off in the middle of the night.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. In fact, John, weren't we in Tennessee like a few years back, and they had all those like starlings or something in the middle of the night, like 2-3 o'clock in the morning? Just it's like wailing banshees just going off around. It's just...
Yes, I believe they are Indian imports rather than Native Americans. So don't blame the Yanks for those. But Andy, I've got a thought, because right at the start of your talk, you mentioned how you found it difficult when the theologians would not see design or regard it as important. Have you got any clues for many of our watchers who have to deal even with local pastors who say this issue doesn't matter, or you can explain it with evolution and just throw God into the mix? How would you deal with that?
I'll tell you, that's a very good point, John, and I thank you for giving me that question. I would say that the pastors need to see the vital connection between creation and a proper understanding of the cross. If you start saying that God used evolution, I'm not saying that such a person is themselves not saved. That's not my point. They may well be saved, and they probably, leading a good evangelical church and teaching the gospel faithfully to their people. But if they start saying that God used evolution, they're making a problem, because your understanding of the cross of Christ is affected, because you're now saying that death was there already. And it's the New Testament which gets affected by this, because it says in the book of Romans, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, right? It's using an argument in the book of Romans. He then said, as by one man sin entered into the world, so salvation came. I'm summarizing. Salvation comes by one man, which is, of course, the Lord Jesus Christ. And if you look up in Romans in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, there is a summary verse which says that as in Adam all die, so all in Christ shall be made alive. So if you're going to say, John, that, as some of these people do, and it doesn't matter, there was death there already, and it was just some spiritual effect that God was reversing when Christ died on the cross. He was taking the penalty for your sin in hell forever. And of course, I accept that. He wasn't going to hell, but he was taking the sin in 3 hours on the cross in darkness, and therefore we don't go to hell as a result of that. Now, I accept that. But he then is having a problem, because Christ then dies physically, and into the hands of God he commits his spirit. Well, why on earth does Christ die physically if in fact death physically had already been there to begin with? You're making a massive theological problem. But the problem is evaporated when you realize that death was not there in the beginning. Death came after sin, and that is part of the penalty for sin. Not only would he take in the 3 hours in his living body, it was dying, but he was still living when he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? But he's actually also physically having to take my death. And he physically dies, because that's part of the penalty for sin. In the day that you eat thereof, Genesis 2, thou shalt surely die. And this is where the rub comes. I get a resurrection body on the basis of Christ physically dying and physically being resurrected. He is the first fruits of them that slept. So I briefly summarized the massive theological problem that pastors make when they diminish the importance of creation, and they just give way to evolution. And of course, the science is denying it. And the science is telling you that the fossils came primarily from the flood, and death followed sin in the world, not just in mankind, but in the whole of nature.
Thanks, Andy.
Great. Thank you very much for that. That's fantastic. All right. Let's just do a quick reminder, guys, for anybody who's jumped in on the stream. Sam, what's going on here? Oh, we can't hear you, Sam. There we are. Sorry.
Oh, there we go. It would help if I unmuted my microphone. To celebrate us hitting 4,000 subscribers on YouTube, we are doing a giveaway, which we will be announcing in a couple of minutes' time. So to say thank you for 4,000 subscribers, we're giving away a few goodies. We're giving away a T-shirt, We're Not Related witness tee, and also a brand new documentary DVD that's just come in hot off the press to Creation Research, One Deadly Bite, from the Wonders Without Number video series with David Reeves that Joe recorded in the USA right before COVID. But yeah, so if you want to enter in the giveaway, there's only 2 or 3 minutes left before closing off the entries for the giveaway. So just simply put your name in the chat, say hi, just send an emoji, go crazy, do whatever. Just let me know that you're there, and I'll stick your name in a wheel spin name picker thing, and we'll spin it live on the stream, so you can see that everything is all fair in giveaways. And
can I just quickly again advertise the summer score, which you got the screen up there, but I'm just sorry, you got it up there on your screen.
Sorry, you get it up on the screen. Go for it. Yeah.
Okay, so can I just remind guys, please, would you apply for that? We'd love to have you. There's still time to book. £65, 2 days, 31st of August, 1st of September. We'd love to have you with me and Joe and others there. Great to see you. Thank you for that, Sam.
Sam, can I ask you a question, mate? See
if you've
been listening. You told them before the audience that their name would be put in a random name selector that you intelligently created.
I didn't intelligently create the software. I just found it on Google. But yes, it was intelligently created via code.
It actually isn't quite random. It was deliberately designed. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yes, there we go. We've got
really interesting conundrum. But enough of that. Andy's our guest, not you tonight.
Yeah.
So that's good.
I know you're running out of time, but I presume there's no more questions, Sam.
There are some questions in the live chat, so I think if you're okay, Andy, and we've got a bit of time, we would do well to jump into a couple of questions, because the live chat over on our YouTube and on Facebook, which is where this live stream goes out to, there's lots of people watching, lots of people talking, so there are a fair few questions. So why don't we just have a few of them?
Have a few, yeah.
Over to you, Sam.
All right. Well, you won't be able to see these, Andy, but they will be available for everyone on the live stream. But we've got to do some thank yous first of all, because people have been sending us a little bit of a monetary donations. So we've got to give thanks to Doki Doki Bible Club, who's come in with 99 US centaroos with a astonished face. I've got to do the actual actions of these. There's a long story behind why I have to do this, because we can't actually see the emojis that people send in because our software doesn't display them. So I have to, it just gives an alternate text version of it. So I have to physically act it out for everyone. Yeah. We've got also another super sticker coming from Doki Doki for 149 US buckaroos, a hamburger. I could do with a hamburger. I know I was on about eating a double decker earlier. We've got George Bond coming in with 20 Aussie buckaroos. Let's get the Creation Research team a coffee and breakfast. Again, man after my own heart. I like that. Talking about food. Got Lynn Colson coming in with 30 New Zealand buckaroos. Thank you, Lynn. God bless you. Got Douglas Boffey as well, who's coming in with 10 British buckaroos. Well done, Andy. Fascinating talk. And so I think that is all in terms of... Oh, no, I've just missed one. This has just come in from Iron Matt here for 4 US buckaroos. This is a Creation Research classic, a pair character exaggeratingly stretching his arm forward to offer a cup of coffee. There we go.
Oh, thank you.
We appreciate that in the early mornings here.
Indeed, and the late nights here. Right, okay, so let us do a few questions. This one is actually coming from my father, who's actually watching. It comes in from Will J. Could Andy give his view on the intricacies of the seed of the Himalayan balsam plant with its amazing spring-loaded mechanism, which shows detailed design and not accidental happenstance?
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with the Himalayan balsam plants.
But
if it's anything like the Scottish broom,
yes, it is a little bit.
Yeah, well, the Scottish broom has and it may be, by the sound of it, Joe's saying it may be similar. I know that it has a spring-loaded pea pod system, which when it snaps, it's under pressure. When it snaps, it just flings out the tiny little, they're like peas in the broom plant, and it just scatters everywhere. So I imagine that it's similar to that by the sound of it.
It is in that terms of the mechanism. It's not exact. It's not in the same family. The Himalayan balsam is it's an invasive species in the UK, but it does produce the flower head, which develops a seed pod. It's kind of it's not quite as long as the broom. It doesn't go as hard, but it kind of stays sort of stumpier and rounder. But like you say, it builds up the pressure. It has little round seeds inside. And if you do it for fun, you go walking along and just give them a tap and they kind of explode. And it flies everywhere.
Sam, just to explain something, we ran several years of experiments out here on our balsam plants, which are also invasive for the same reason, Joe. And there's a little spring inside, and when it unwinds, a whole series of sort of machine gun effective seeds are spread out, and we measured how far they would fly. And this is an almost microscopic seed that is blasted 20 meters. Now, if you think of so I asked one physicist to calculate the actual force needed to blast a microscopic seed 20 meters, and he said, this is unbelievable. This is a better spring than anything we've been able to actually manufacture. The explosive force is incredible. And so I learned in that experiment why that you'd plant 1 year, then you'd have 10,000 in 3 years' time over 100 acres. It was just quite incredible. You didn't need the wind. It just went boom. So it was brilliantly designed. Andy, your team might get some spring mechanisms for shooting something.
That sounds interesting. A bit of physics. Yeah.
It sort of shows you why it does so well as an invasive species, because it does spread far and wide. All right. Any other questions, Sam?
Yeah, we've got plenty to go. So we've got this one coming from Shogiwa. Thank you for coming, Shogiwa. A question. When I was a kid, I heard that the bombardier beetle couldn't evolve because it would blow itself up. He went on to say that when I was at uni, a non-Christian said that wasn't true, as they had mixed the chemicals from the bombardier beetle and they weren't explosive. Could you elaborate on whether this is true or not?
They're both right. I actually mentioned in my talk that the two chemicals Tom Eisner maintained, and I think he was right, are coming down the same single tube, right? We don't quite understand how they're made. That's yet another biomimetic bit of research waiting for a student to work out. The other bit, by the way, is we don't know how it senses where the attack's coming from, and we also don't know how it moves its turrets so well. But anyway, on the chemicals, right, it's bringing these chemicals down this tube. And the reason why nothing is happening is because the catalyst isn't there, and it's a very, very small tube. Probably it might be even as small as, well, it certainly would be microns. So that's dealing with a thousandth of a millimeter, but it might be even smaller than that. And it might be even getting down to Armstrong sizes. Now, that means that chemical reactions are actually getting suppressed once you get to that small. But the other point is this, that I mentioned, that the catalyst is needed in order to get those chemicals to become explosive. So if the bombardier beetle was playing with those chemicals and the catalyst as well, without a special chamber in which to have those catalysts injected, right? Then it could be in danger actually of blowing certainly its backside off. So it is only a half truth to say that we've got these two chemicals and they don't react. Well, of course they don't react because you haven't got the catalyst. But as soon as you put the catalyst, as Richard Dawkins, to be fair to him, did show, it actually causes at least the hydrogen peroxide to really get going. So, points made.
Point set and match. There we go. Right. Do you want to do? I've got two more relevant bombardier beetle ones and another one that isn't.
Yeah,
related.
let's just let's go through a couple more before we close up. We might as well.
Fair enough. Doki Doki sent in this question. So how would you answer the critics that point out hydrogen peroxide and hydroquinone do not spontaneously explode when mixed, as an argument the beetle is being designed?
That's pretty much the same.
Yeah,
question.
Same question.
Pretty much, it's pretty much the same question.
The catalyst, they do work. So the marvel is that the beetle has got the catalyst in the right place, just when the chemicals are coming into the combustion chamber, and it's probably in crystalline form on the wall of the chamber. That's what Tom Eisner thought. And I think I think there's evidence to agree with him on that. And as soon as those chemicals sense the catalyst, bang, everything happens.
Perfect.
All right.
And that's shown in the laboratory. The Garth Hewitt experiment, when he put in I think it was aluminium filings, he put them into the test tube, he got peroxide and hydroquinone. And as soon as the catalyst went in, which is not taking part in the reaction, but it encourages the reactions of the chemicals to take place, the two liquids, bang, everything bubbled off.
Yeah, a catalyst actually just speeds up chemical reactions.
Yeah, that's right.
It doesn't take part in it. So all it's doing is speeding up the reaction by a matter of thousands and thousands of times.
That's right.
That's what makes the difference. So the chemistry is the same. It's the speed of the reaction.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Diane.
All right, so two more questions, I think, Sam.
Yeah, two more questions. So this one comes in from Lynn Colson. Thank you very much, Lynn. Does the bombardier beetle have external protection from splattering?
People have always asked me that because of that final frame that I show where he's lifting his leg and then squirting out the blast. I don't think actually the leg is particularly damaged because it's got hardened cuticle round most of its leg. It's only the bottom bit of its foot which doesn't have hard cuticle around it. So the hard cuticle will actually protect the beetle, from what I can make out.
Stuff. All right. Well, I think that's down to the last question there, Sam.
Down to the last question. So this one is a generalized question. It's directed at you, Andy, but it is open to the entire team. This one comes in from Sandy C. Thank you very much. Does Dr. McIntosh think dinosaurs had feathers, and could they have evolved into birds? Thanks.
I think the answer is no, but let me just say there are some creationists, I won't name them, who try to argue that dinosaurs need to be redefined as a group of creatures which are defined by other characteristics other than just feathers. Sorry, I beg your pardon, I put that badly. That dinosaurs are defined as creatures which are not just in terms of things that we normally think of. The public perception of dinosaurs, and I much prefer this definition, is of cold-blooded creatures, that is reptiles, because there's all the evidence is that they had scales, a bit like crocodiles today, and that they laid eggs just like crocodiles do today, because we've got plenty of examples of dinosaur fossilized eggs, fossilized dinosaur eggs. So my view of the the term dinosaur is that they are essentially extinct reptiles, similar not in direct morphology, but similar in principle to crocodiles and other reptiles. Okay.
Can I just ask you quickly, Andy, because we've talked about feathered dinosaurs on Creation Conversations before, and obviously John and I can talk from a fossil-y perspective.
Of course you can, yeah.
But what I want to ask you is, from a
yeah, I was coming to it, but I need to define my terms.
Sorry, go for it. Yeah. I was just asking.
So I'm sorry if I was a bit long-winded.
That's right.
It's just that I know you can do that, and you'll do it far better than me. But if you keep to a definition of the word dinosaur as a cold-blooded reptile, right, which in my view is what the common understanding is of a dinosaur, right, then there's no way you could have had feathered dinosaurs because of my own discipline, which is aerodynamics and thermodynamics, okay? Because as soon as you put feathers on, right, you actually stop the heat getting in to the creature, which is fine for a bird, which has warm-blooded, like we are warm-blooded. It's not the same system, but it's a warm-blooded creature. If you've got a cold-blooded creature like a dinosaur, it needs to warm up in the sunshine, okay? It doesn't get going until it's got hot during the middle of the morning, you know. They're dozy creatures in the beginning of the day, and then they get their energy and they pounce and do all that they do as predators. So I think it's a complete misnomer to talk about feathered dinosaurs because you're putting feathers onto a cold-blooded creature. Feathers, I would suggest that anything with feathers is a distinctive of birds. So we do find some feathered creatures which we don't have today. Archaeopteryx is an example, right? And I do think that some of the findings in China do distinctly look like birds because they've got all the features of what I would say you would expect a bird to have, but they've got extra features. Archaeopteryx has got a bony tail. Birds don't have bony tails today. They've got teeth, and most birds don't have teeth. But that just simply means that there was a much wider group of birds in the past which had bony tails and teeth, but they weren't dinosaurs. There's no way that you could have had a cold-blooded creature having feathers. That's my view as an engineer looking at an engineer with an expertise in thermodynamics and indeed aerodynamics, looking at this whole issue of so-called feathered dinosaurs. I don't believe that any of the creatures should be called feathered dinosaurs. Any of the
if I can just launch something on the back of that, because here in Australia, we just opened our new museum 2 weeks ago, and we were totally overbooked. So our main display is on dinosaurs, the history of the monsters God made. It makes that point that you're making, and we even have a whole wall on the feathered dinosaur fraud. But the reason I want to remind people about this is people have asked, when are we going to open it again? Because that was a trial run. We are, for those people who missed out and anybody else who wants to come, next Saturday, the 19th here, from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, that museum here in Brisbane, next to Archerfield Airport, will be open again. So for those of you who are awake and listening here in Australia, if you want to be part of that dinosaur tour and look at the evidence like Andy's talking about, then you must get in touch with us at info@creationresearch.net and let us know you're coming, because we'll be inviting our people who want to learn how to guide people through the museum on that day as well. So that's Saturday, the 19th of August, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And thank you, Andy, for that great definition there. That's really helpful.
And if I can just add a very brief thing to the end of that about a personal experience that I've had regarding feathered dinosaurs, right? Because Andy has mentioned some of these dinosaurs, particularly the ones coming from China, or things that are purported to be dinosaurs coming from China, which look like they have feathers in them. But then you'll go to the Natural History Museum in London and you'll see velociraptor models which are covered in feathers, right? And you ask, well, how much evidence do we have of velociraptors having feathers? And the answer is very little, really. We've never found a single feather next to a velociraptor. And so what you'll then find is that we went to go and source because we want to talk about the life size, right, of a velociraptor, which is much, much smaller than the general public perception. They're sourced from an associate of mine, an acquaintance of mine, who's worked with museums around the world. He is an expert in casting dinosaurs, right? And he had made a brilliant cast of a velociraptor in the drowning pose, right? Brilliant cast. And we ordered one, got it sent to Australia. It turns out that it was one of the new casts that he'd done most recently, and it is covered in feathers, fossil feathers. And I said to him, well, where are these fossil feathered, velociraptor casts coming from? He said, oh, we don't find any ones with fossil feathers on them, but it's what the museums want nowadays, so we add them in.
So now, you can come along on August the 19th and actually see that here in Australia.
Now that's intellectual dishonesty, at its greatest. This is what museums want. It's no different, and we could go on and talk about all these kind of things. It's no different from when they show you a lovely model of Lucy in the museums when she's upright, walking with whites in her eyes, given the appearance of being a subhuman kind of creature. So really, there's very little evidence for feathers on dinosaurs at all, as we've discussed.
Just two people that I just mentioned. I'm not going to mention the people who are pushing a view which I don't accept, because I don't want to blacken they sincerely disagree with us, but I'm not going to mention their names. But I will mention those who agree with us, as well as John and Joe here, obviously, but and Craig, but and Diane, of course. But the two people I'd just like to mention, Joel Tay has written on this, and I can't remember where the publications are, but if you look up his name, he's a person who believes in creation, and he has actually produced, I think it's in the Answers Research Journal, or it may be the Technical Journal, one of those. He's written on this whole issue from the perspective you've just been saying. And interestingly, a person who is much maligned in the evolutionary world has actually stood up against the feathered dinosaur idea. He's not a Christian. His name is Alan Fiducia. And he's got a whole suite of people working with him. And he has been corresponding with some other people who've actually know full well that Alan is taking some stick for what he maintains, because people are trying to malign him, but he's actually done his homework very carefully. And it's worth reading what Alan actually says, even though he doesn't accept the creationist position, doesn't accept the age of the earth that we would take, doesn't accept the flood. But he says, no way does the evidence justify the idea of feathered dinosaurs.
I know that one of the dinosaurs that's is heavily pushed from evolutionists currently at the minute is Sinosauropteryx.
Yes.
That has that's supposedly covered with feathers, that's clearly preserved. Does that have any modicum of truth to that?
Well, from my perspective, very briefly, they don't look a thing like feathers, and they're probably Diane's the best person to comment on, because they are most likely decaying collagen fibers.
Yes,
we have very, very good fossil feathers preserved in the fossil record, and they don't look anything like that. So it's basically a simple.
They're not panaceous feathers, we call them, Craig. And those who are listening to me or looking at this program, that means they're not feathers which could bear weight. They're not flight feathers. They're nothing like it. They're just bits of bits of ligament, some people have said, maybe collagen fibers, as Joseph has said. They're nothing like anything to do with real feathers.
So thank you for that prediction, Andy. That's at our museum next Saturday, the 19th. Come and see Sinosauropteryx.
And remember the Truth in Science program. I'll be there. There'll be a whole host of people there. Andy will be there. Do come along if you can make it. Not just if you are a university or college student, but really it's going much deeper than just the scientific things, into the whole social and political side of things as well from a Christian perspective. So make sure you come on to that on the 31st of August to the 1st of September. You can find more about it by visiting the Truth in Science website.
Please book. You need to book.
Indeed. So please do that. Highly recommended. A brief quick reminder for next week. John will be here, and John will be here because we will be discussing John's time on the BBC when he was interviewed by Hard Talk a few years back. We've been through the archives and we have found the complete unedited version of the BBC Hard Talk program that was provided to John or to John's associates after he'd been on the BBC. So we've got a copy. We'll be playing that next week. It'll go up on our YouTube channel afterwards. It is a must watch, and it's pretty amazing. Craig, I know you've seen it. What did you think of it?
Yeah, well, I reckon it's one of the best interviews, under attack by a journalist, by a Christian that I've seen. It's great, John.
There we go. So we really do need to get everybody watching that. It's going to be fantastic. So join us next week for that. But before we close, Sam, are you ready for giveaway?
I am ready for giveaway. I'll share my screen so you can all see what's going on. Right. Okay. Let's do that and share. Right, here we go. So we have wheelofnames.com. This is not an affiliation with wheelofnames.com. It's just a site I found on Google. So you can see all of your names here. Lynn Colson, Shoguar, Douglas Boffey, Paul Cap, Doki Doki, Andrew Hilliard, Will J, Anne Squire, AC130, Chopper, Zero Steel 12, Sandy
Lots
C,
of
I'm
names,
Matt,
lots of
Ringo
names.
Cat, blah, 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 blah. Right, let's click the wheel. Let's spin it. Who's won? Here we go. And the winner is... Oh, it's Doki Doki Bible Club. We have a winner. There we go. Doki Doki, you are the winner of this giveaway. So you've won yourself a t-shirt and a free DVD. So please do get in touch with us. You can send it to, where can they send?
info@creationresearchuk.com. info@creationresearchuk.com, and you will be able to let us know details from there. Thank you very much. Do continue to support us until we reach the 5,000 mark, which we're looking forward to getting to sometime soon. And continue to like, subscribe, watch, and everything else as well. So until next time, guys, we will say goodbye and God bless. Andy, thank you so much for being
lovely
on the show
to be
with us.
you. And all the best to you, John. I pray for you all, and praying especially for you, John, as you're caring for your good wife. And the Lord bless you all. Thank you for this tremendous ministry, and I look forward to working with you, Joe.
I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon. Absolutely, not too long.
And Craig, keep in touch. I love what you're doing in Tasmania, and your seahorses. I'll never forget them.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.
It's wonderful.
All right.
Yeah.
Goodbye. God bless. We'll see you.
God bless you, Diane. Bye, Sam. Bye, everybody. Bye now.
See you again.
See you guys.
Bye.